Good morning, everyone. It's great to see everyone here this morning. If you're visiting with us, we really appreciate you visiting with us this morning. The first thing I'd like to ask before we get started with the lesson this morning is for everyone that brought a cell phone with them this morning to take your cell phone out. Go ahead and take it out. It's all right. What I'd like everyone to do is those who can and do text, look around and see if there's someone that you don't see here this morning that you normally see. I can think of 3 or 4 people I've checked this morning in the audience that I haven't seen this morning. So I'm just going to take a second out here and send them a quick text and say, I missed you today. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It'll just take me a minute. And I encourage everyone else to do it. Okay. Okay, I'm probably quicker than some people. That's all right. And for the rest of us that don't text, and for the rest of us that do text, when you're done, please turn your ringer off and put it back in your pocket or your purse. Okay. The title of the lesson today is going to be Things You Won't Hear on the News. The sign out front said things you won't see on the news, but it's actually things you won't hear on the news. It was right in the bulletin. First I want to talk about today, I want to talk about eternity. And I originally had this idea that, I told Tad about this, I was going to rent a laser that spins, and they use it for making ceilings in buildings and putting in drywall and stuff when you want a line completely level around the room. You set it up on a tripod, you turn it on, it spins, and then you have a perfectly level line. But with the thought that this line would represent eternity. And it has no beginning and it has no end. And if you could look up and see that line, you could just think about it that way. Well, as the way things do happen to go, when I called Home Depot to rent it this week, they said, we don't rent those anymore. So I was telling my daughter that, and she told me something that I guess I like even better. She said a friend told her that possibly God thinks about eternity like this wall over here. He can see the beginning and the end and the top and the bottom. Now, James says that what is your life but a vapor which appears for a while and then is gone. And what he meant by that was our physical life. So if we look on this wall over here, I can put a little dot up here with the laser. Just think about that as your life, here for a while and then gone. I'd like to talk about 4 things this morning, considering dealing with eternity. I'm just going to touch lightly because if I talked as much as I wanted to, we'd be here way long. But the 4 things I'd like to talk about this morning is there is a God, there is a heaven and a hell, we are in a spiritual warfare, and life is the final exam. I was reading up trying to find some statistics, and the latest statistics I could find, polls show that 85% of Americans believe in God. And when I first read that, I thought, wow, really? 85% of Americans believe in God. What a different world this would be if that was true. Then I did a little more research. I found out that the latest date I could find was 2009 just for the city of Taylor, had 59,000 people. And 37% of those people reported to be churchgoers. I thought, well, that figure sounds a lot more close to reality. But taking the concept that most people believe in God, and I believe most people do, but belief is not enough. James tells us, James 2:19, you believe in God, you believe that God is one, you do well. For the devils also believe and tremble. The problem I think most people have is they think of God as Grandpa God. He's just a good, kindly old man that will forgive them for no matter what they do. They can live their lives however they want to live, and then God will forgive them. Well, let me just read a few scriptures that I picked up while studying for this lesson, because I was thinking that's not true. For if we go on sinning willfully after receiving a knowledge of the truth, this is Hebrews 10:26, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a terrifying expectation of judgment and the fury of a fire which will consume the adversary. And again, in 1 Corinthians 1:25, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Another, Psalm 77:13, your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? Deuteronomy 4:23, so watch yourselves that you do not forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which he made with you, and make for yourselves a graven image in the form of anything against which the Lord your God has commanded you. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. So, to know God, we've got to read the book. The book is our guide. The book is what's going to take us to heaven. It's our roadmap. Just touching now a little bit on heaven and hell. Jesus said in Matthew 13:47, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet cast into the sea and gathering fish of every kind. And when it was filled, they drew it up on the beach, and they sat down and gathered the good fish into containers, but the bad they threw away. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come forth and take out the wicked from among the righteous, and will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So it doesn't sound very much to me like Grandpa God. Now, I want to say something that I definitely know that you're not going to hear on the news. And that is, everyone in this auditorium is going to die at one time or another. Our physical life, we are going to die. But we have a spiritual life. And in our spiritual life, we'll live on forever. So, if we can agree to the fact that we are going to die at some time, even though we don't like to, we have to think about what are we doing during our physical life to prepare us for our spiritual life. I met this lady, Sue, this summer. A mutual friend of ours, Stephanie, asked me to help her out because she was having some problems with her car. I found out that Sue is a 2-time cancer survivor. And she was going to Ann Arbor for treatments, and she put a lot of money into her car, over $2,000. And when I got there and looked at her car, well, I guess the best word I can use to describe it is it's a hoopty. I wouldn't have put $2,000 in it, I would have bought another car. But I looked at the bill and I looked at what they charged, and I had a few questions. So she said, well, let's call the garage and you can ask them. We called, the line was busy. So I waited a few minutes, we called, the line was busy. I said, well, I'll wait a few more minutes. So I thought, what a great opportunity to try to witness Christ to this lady. So I said, Sue, do you study the Bible or do you attend church anywhere? She said, well, I used to. But when I was attending there when I was younger, I was supporting my mom and putting myself through college. And I needed some financial support. And the church didn't want to support me, even though they were supporting some other people in this way. So ever since then, I've given up on, she used the term organized religion. She said, once in a while, I'll go to a function they have, and I'll help out, but I don't believe in organized religion. And I thought, wow, here's a 2-time cancer survivor that doesn't believe in God. She doesn't study the Bible. And she said, well, I believe in God, but I'm going to be like the thief on the cross. I said, wow. I said, Sue, you don't want to die like the thief on the cross. She said, no, I'm just going to wait till the last minute. And then I'm going to ask God for forgiveness and make things right. So we then got a call from Stephanie, and we couldn't get a hold of the garage, so we decided to meet later and go down there and address it, which we did, and we got everything worked out. But I never got the chance to ask Sue, after I got to thinking about it, if I get to talk to her again, I want to ask her, so Sue, when exactly are you going to die? And where are you going to be when you die? And what are you going to be doing? And, exactly how are you going to die? They were talking about it all week in the news. 4 guys that got in a van and they were on the freeway. And another man got on the wrong side of the freeway and all 5 were killed. I'm sure not a one of them got in their car that day thinking they were going to die. So if my plan is to wait till the end, well, what if the end comes quickly? Very quickly. How am I going to know what I need to know to be saved if I'm going to wait till the end? We don't know when we're going to die. I think I guess you could consider that poor planning. If I said to you, sometime in your life, and I don't know exactly when, but sometime in your life, you are going to have to drive a semi-truck off of a car. The car crashes in the back of it. The car's on fire. You can't pull the people out because it's underneath the trailer. You got to get in there and pull that thing off so you can get the doors open. There's nobody else around. Well, don't you think it'd be a good idea to learn how to drive a semi before that time? Do we take paramedics and put them out in the field and then have them learn CPR when someone's having a heart attack? I was in a CPR class at work a few years ago. I think there was about 20 some of us in the class. They asked the question, has anybody here ever had to give CPR? And 2 people said they did. I was surprised, really, out of just 20 some. And to tell you the truth, one of the gentlemen who was in the class with me was working with someone who got electrocuted working on a transformer. And they considered him to be dead because he had no heartbeat. And Jason gave him CPR, and he's alive today because of it. What if Jason had waited until he needed to learn CPR? That's the way some of us are living our lives. We're going to wait till the end and then learn what we need to do to be saved. We're going to wait to the end before we start living our lives to please God. I don't think that's a very good way to live our lives. I talk a little bit here now about us being in a spiritual war. First, I want to read Ephesians 6:10 through 17. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the full armor of God, so you will be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything to stand firm, stand firm. Therefore, having girded your loins with truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. In addition to all, taking up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish the flaming arrows of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. So I think this ties in beautifully with what I was just talking about. The Bible's telling us to be prepared for when Satan attacks, because he does attack. And he is so slick. He's become so, I just can't find the right word for it, so easy. He slips in our lives without us really realizing it sometimes. I know it's happened to me, and I think it happens to all of us. Sometimes, though, we're standing there with the door wide open and let him in. I think a lot of times sin is like a pool of cold water on a hot day. And we're walking down the street, and man, it's hot outside. And let me tell you, I'm just going to go over here, and this pool looks so nice and cool. I just want to dip my toe in there. I'm just going to put my toe in there. And next thing you know, we're in over our head. But we're the ones that put our toe in there. I don't think sometimes we stop and think about how easily we're influenced by others. I want to tell you a little story about what happened this summer. Louis Merca, bless his heart. I was over working on the lawnmower, and Sandra and Mike were gracious enough to let me come in and cool off and get a glass of cool water. And it happened to be Louis's birthday. And he was peppering me with questions. But that's okay, I'm used to it. I have a 5-year-old named Gabriel who does the same thing. And after the first question or so, whenever I answered, he would say, "And then what happened?" And then first he asked me about fixing the lawnmower, then he asked me about my fingers, and then he asked me about my family, and he just didn't seem to wear out. But you know, I found myself saying the same thing. And I was telling Sandra the other day, where I work, I'm kind of like a write-up guy. People come in and with their company vehicles and have problems with them. Somebody will come in and say, "I was driving to work this morning and I had a blowout." And then I'll say, "And then what happened?" I say it without even thinking about it. And I learned that from 5-year-old Louis. And I was also thinking about, this happened a few weeks ago in a Bible class I was teaching for jury. We have some young men in there that are young Christians, and we wanted to make sure that they knew the basics. So we had finished doing a little review, and I happened to ask both the boys that were in there, I said, what would you like to do when you're an adult? Now, I don't know how it is for kids nowadays, but when I was a kid, adults asked me that question all the time. But they both said, "I would like to be a professional football player." And I thought to myself, I said, let me ask you both another question. Have you ever thought about being a preacher? Have you ever thought about being an elder, a Bible class teacher? Have you ever thought about serving God? And they said, "No, we really hadn't thought about that." And then I think to myself, that's our fault. That's our fault as adults, because we're not teaching our kids that. We're encouraging them to go and play professional sports and be a ball player when we know the chances of that are very, very slim. But we're not encouraging to stand up for God, to be a great gospel preacher, a great elder, great teacher, song leaders, and the ladies to be teachers and to grow up and take care of their homes. So we really failed in this way, and I don't know, I thought to myself, I guess we never really think about it. So this is a way that Satan slipped in on us without us really thinking about it. If we were to be even a sports guy, got to be a famous quarterback. How long would that last? 8, 10 years? I don't know. I don't really follow sports. But how many men have been gospel preachers for 50 years or more? A lot more. A lot more. And I ask this question too. Do you think Satan would ever whisper in someone's ear the truth about sinning? Let's just talk about drinking for a minute. I'm talking about drunkenness. We were watching something at work during a lunch break on TV about a young man who was in his 20s, started drinking in his teens, got into a car, drunk, killed some people. Now, when he took that first drink, when he first started drinking, if someone would have said to him, you know, this is going to lead to you killing somebody, would have he believed it? But I'm sure there was no one there to tell him that. Satan doesn't work that way. He says, one drink won't hurt. One little sin won't hurt. It'll be all right. Nobody will know. How about the person that abuses drugs, loses their family, their wife, their job, their house, everything? I'm sure nobody ever started out, let's say it was a cocaine user, and they grabbed that first dose of cocaine and said, man, I'm going to destroy my life with this. If we were given the choice to sin or die, what would we choose? I'm thinking about our lives. You know, I think we're too afraid to die, a physical death. I know that the first century church wasn't. Stephen, when he was being stoned, said, Father, forgive them. Well, I sure wish we could have that attitude. I wish I could have that attitude. We need to pray to have that attitude. And that leads into the last thing. Life is a test. I'd like to read these words from Christ, our Lord. People ask him, they said, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? And he said to them, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and foremost commandment. The second is like to it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Keeping with the thinking and the theme of life as a final exam, we're taking it right now. Every thought, every action, every word, every deed, right or wrong, is part of the test. But, as I had mentioned this in a Wednesday morning Bible class, and Chris Kinsey said, and he's so right, it's an open book test. You don't need to fail it. All the instructions, all the directions, all the answers are right here in the book. But you've got to read the book for yourself. You've got to pick it up and read it. We can't rely on others. We know that men will fail. But just as assuredly, we should know that God will not fail. And God will not fail us. We never know when we're going to have to give account of ourselves. And I ask this question of myself, and I ask this question of everyone here today. Are you studying for the final? Because there's not going to be a finals week. But rest assured, there will be a final exam. Well, now I'd like to try to summarize up what I've said. I've said everything to make us think a little more about our lives and how we're not going to live forever. And we shouldn't love this life as we love our spiritual life. We should think about eternity so that we can live this life to make it to eternity, to make it with God. I can't put it any better than Jesus himself did. He says in the Gospel of Luke, in the 12th chapter, starting at verse 4, I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that have no more they can do. But I will warn you to whom to fear. Fear the one who, after he has killed, has authority to cast you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 cents? Yet not one of them is forgotten before God. Indeed, the very hairs on your head are numbered. Do not fear, you are more valuable than many sparrows. And I say unto you, everyone who confesses me before the men, the Son of Man will confess him also before the angels of God. But he who denies me before men will be denied before the angels of God. I had this thought driving home Friday night. And I talked to my family about it this morning so I could get it right. I'm here today because of my wife's great-great-grandfather. He was a gospel preacher. And he influenced his son, my wife's grandfather. And he influenced my wife's mother. And he influenced her. She took my wife to church, and she was a Christian. And when I met her, I became a Christian because of that. I went to church. And because of that, we married, have a family, and one daughter's with us here, and my son-in-law, and she married a Christian. And they have children, and Rachel's Christian. We count them as 6 generations of Christians because one man was faithful. Just think about it, brothers and sisters. I'm not talking about going out and saving the lost even. I'm just talking about within your own family, what a tremendous impact you can have. Now think about, through those 6 generations, how many people have been influenced for Christ. And every generation has had someone to influence them because of the faith of one man. So this morning we have a choice. I hope I've stirred your conscience some. I hope mostly that what I've said makes sense. As I find the most difficult thing about preaching is, it makes sense to me up here. But boy, when it comes out here, it could be way different. My wife reminds me of that all the time. And I thank her for that. So we have a choice this morning to serve God, to be leaders among our people. Or we have a choice to let Satan creep in and turn us away. You know, Satan can come blasting in that door that we held wide open for him, or he'll try to sneak underneath the crack. But believe me, he's going to try and come in there. And I heard someone say once something that I really thought was wonderful. You know, Christ says in the Bible that he stands at the door to our heart and knocks. And just like this door here is a door to your heart, because you can't open the door from the outside. It's not that Christ couldn't open the door to our heart from the outside, but that he's not going to. If we want Christ in our heart, we have to open the door. He's standing and knocking. Are we going to open the door or not? This is a question we have to pose this morning. Brothers and sisters and friends and visitors, I ask you to seriously consider these things this morning. We're going to sing a song of invitation. If you have a need, if you've decided it's time for you to put on the gospel, to become a child of God, we're here to serve you. If you've wandered away, if you've let Satan come into your life somehow that you didn't even realize, we'll pray for you and we'll pray with you. We'll stand alongside you. If you have a need this morning, please come forward as we stand and sing.